I've been to Gifford Pinchot National Forest near Mount Adams many times. Once on the Pacific Crest Trail, our horses got wind of something. Never saw it, but they refused to go any further. They'd never done that before. My mom and I thought, nope. We turned around and quickly headed out. My best one was the beginning of August 2019. My husband, son, daughter-in-law, their dog, and I went disbursement camping in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. We left the main road in Randall, Washington, and took a somewhat treacherous forest road a few miles into the forest. We found a spot we loved because it was very secluded and we hadn't seen or heard another soul or vehicle since entering the forest. We had no cell phone service, so after taking a few photos, I plugged my phone into the charger inside our vehicle. After dinner, my daughter-in-law and I walked down the road together to find some spots to relieve ourselves. It was completely pitch black outside. Their dog went with us, but he started acting weird, yipping with a loud growl. He was about 10 feet from me. Tried to call him back to us, but he refused to come, which is very unlike him. I ran up to him, grabbed him by the collar, and he sort of snapped at me, which is completely out of character. When we got back to our campsite, my son made his dog go into the tent for a little time out. Within a few minutes, it started to rain, so we hurried, cleaned up, and got into our tents. I'm a light sleeper, so it took me a while, but I finally fell asleep to the continued sound of the pouring rain. I awoke to a screaming yell like I'd never heard before. I soon realized there was approximately 6 to 8 creatures howling, screaming, yelling back and forth over each other. The sounds were terrifying, like absolutely deranged humans. They seemed to be a half a mile from us. I tried to run through my mind every animal I knew, but it didn't sound like anything I was familiar with. Not a dog, coyote, elk, cow, cougar, or bear. It certainly wasn't any sort of bird. The only thing remotely similar was recordings of Sasquatch audio that I've heard over the years. I was facing north, and the sounds were coming from my right and left. I was absolutely terrified. I was afraid to wake my husband or even move because I did not want to call any attention to ourselves. Fortunately, whatever was making the sounds didn't come any closer. I also realized that if I had not left my phone in the car, I would have had a really good recording of what I was hearing. These sounds went on for what seemed like well over an hour as I continued to listen in terror. I'm not sure how, probably from the adrenaline crash, but I eventually did fall back to sleep. The next morning, I shared what I heard with my family, and we all decided to move out of the forest to continue our camping trip. My son and I have talked about going back there to camp, but I'm not sure I want to hear that again. Surely don't want it any closer than that either. I live in New York City. The L train runs from Brooklyn to Manhattan under the East River. In Manhattan, the stops are First Ave, 3rd, then Union Square, which is a major transfer point. Which morning rush hour in 2012, I was packed L train, which emerged from the East River at First Ave, opened its door as usual, closed them, then proceeded along the track, per usual. About 30 seconds later, the train stopped, and the announcer, First Ave, 3rd Ave next, stand clear. I looked around a bit stunned, but the bleary-eyed passengers were mostly staring into their phones. I imagine I have just gotten a little confused. The doors closed again, the train took off down the track, slowed down, stopped, and opened its doors. The announcer, First Ave, 3rd next, stand clear. This time I poked my head out quickly and saw it was definitely First Ave. I spoke up shyly, to no one in particular. Hey, did anyone notice we stopped at First Ave 3 times? 1 or 2 people kind of looked quizzically and then evaded eye contact. The doors then closed. The train took off, slowed down after 30 or more seconds, and opened. 3rd Ave, Union Square next, stand clear. The train then continued west down the track, normal as could be. For years I thought about this event. I was there, cognizant and clear-eyed as ever, clutching a coffee, but I've never found any explanation. I worked in an airport and was the lead of the ramp team, the ground handlers. I was waiting for a Delta Ron flight to arrive. It was nighttime and we were in a position so I could marshal the plane into the gate. When the plane arrived, it would have to go beside the far end of the terminal, out of view, turn around, come up the taxiway, turn left, taxi to the assigned gate, and turn into the park. All is quiet, plane is less than 10 minutes out. We look over, and clear as can be, we see the tail of a Delta plane going behind the building with its logo lit up and everything. We waited and waited. Nothing came around. A few moments later, the plane lands. There was no other Delta plane scheduled to arrive. I only used one gate at my airport. There was absolutely no way to see what we did at the moment. One time I dropped an apple in the middle of an empty floor, no tables nearby that it could have rolled under, and it just vanished, completely disappeared. No trace left behind. I didn't even hear it hit the floor. I suspect maybe I'm just an idiot and didn't see where it went, but I looked all over the room and couldn't find it to save my life. At a friend's house when I was 10, we went upstairs and down the hall into his room, but when we got through the door into his room, we went through a door into his kitchen. We stood for a second looking at each other wondering, WTF? His mother just asked if we forgot something, because to her it looked like we just ran down the stairs and turned around and ran back. We went properly to his room and just asked each other if that really happened. One time I heard me, the computer, and the TV say the same sentence in synchronicity. I question reality to this day. I was walking along the driveway when it was windy. I didn't like the wind that was blowing my hair in my face, so I spread my arms out and imagined it stopping. All of a sudden, I couldn't feel any wind on me anymore. My hair had stopped blowing in my face. The really weird part is the wind was just as wild ever around me. The trees were getting their branches and the leaves blowing around everywhere, just the same. Then, when I stopped concentrating on the wind stopping, I could feel it again and got hair in my face again. This happened twice, so far. I was crossing a road in my shitty older car when a big truck came barreling down on top of me from across the street. I knew I couldn't make it across, and that the truck didn't have the space to slow down or even swerve. I closed my eyes and gave up to it. When I opened them, I was on the other side of the intersection, and the truck was going at the same speed a block past me. I've driven hundreds of thousands of miles since then, with plenty of entirely explainable near misses. But I still know there was some glitch that let me make it across that day. I used to live in the opposite side of town when people started asking me if I've been to X place, or mentioning, "Oh, I saw you at X yesterday." I would always say, "No, that can't be me. I haven't been around there in ages." They would insist the person had the same hair color, same hairstyle, same style and clothes, same height, even the same bag I carry to work. That went on for a month and stopped. Months later, I moved to that part of town and got a job also there. So there I am, living there and frequenting all those places people would tell me they saw me before. For one day, everyone I was talking to was having the ability to have the same conversation with me. The topic was on disability studies, and none of them knew each other. For example, in the morning, I was having a discussion with my professor. Then later that day, a friend brought it up who doesn't attend the same class I do. Later that evening, another friend mentioned how she wanted to do their master's in disability studies. Weirdest situation ever. I have a twin. Occasionally, she and I will experience physical manifestations of each other's pain and injuries. She got in a car crash once, and the airbag blew up in her face. We both woke up the next morning with black eyes. I was not in the accident. I blew up my ankle, and she couldn't walk for 2 weeks. People think we're full of crap, but there's no explanation. It doesn't happen every time one of us gets hurt, but it's happened maybe a half dozen times in almost 40 years. I was sitting on my couch knitting, and behind me is a desk and desk chair. I feel and hear someone running behind me. I turn quickly thinking it is my kid, but nothing is there, and the desk chair was slightly spinning. I kind of had a moment and looked throughout the house. Everything was fine. I pushed out my mind and continued to knit. Then, from the corner of my eyes, I see this figure staring at me, peering from the side of my couch. I look. I see it disappears. It was this little blonde boy with bright, almost glowing blue eyes and greenish blue purple/gray face and a dark purple smile. There's this light that hovers beyond the cornfield across from my house. It used to be rainbow, then it was pink for a while, and now it's rainbow again. I just see it every now and then, maybe once or twice a month. It usually hovers there all night, but I've seen it leave a couple times. It just flies way off to the west. I saw it a few days ago, actually. Lived in a sinister haunted house for a couple years when I was younger. Lots of unsettling things happened over a few years I was there, but one I remember with full clarity is late one night. I got out of bed to use the toilet, and while I was in there, I heard a stranger's voice, deep, male sounding. He was laughing. Hard to explain, but I felt that it was laughing at me. I was already a nervous wreck in that house, so it didn't help, and I stayed in the bathroom crying for what felt like hours. Eventually, I must have woken up my mom because she came and found me, convinced me to open the bathroom door, and took me back to my room. I vividly remember her tucking me back into bed and staying with me for a while because I was so upset. The next morning, and every time after that I've mentioned it, she has zero recollection of getting up that night. But I definitely used the bathroom because I have to unravel the loo, roll away too far, and constantly got told off for letting it drag on the floor, which is what I'd done that night. Weird house. In my early 20s, I took a personal day from my night shift job. I just needed a break and to get outside for a while. I drove about 15 miles from home to a church that has one of those stone labyrinth walking contemplation circles. When I made it to the middle of the labyrinth, there was tremendous snarling sound from the tree line about 150 feet away, which was followed by the sound like a horse screaming in fear or pain. The horse sound stopped abruptly. There was a thud, then complete silence. I stood there frozen, not moving, thinking there must have been a bear or a wolf or something, both unlikely, as this was in the suburbs of Chicago, listening as intently as I could. Nothing. A minute passed, more nothing. I started thinking, okay, must have been spooked an animal that ran off. Nothing to worry about. Come on, adrenaline, calm yourself down. I took one start back on the path to the contemplation circle. Behind me, a crashing sound, breaking branches, then a thumping of heavy footfalls on the ground, coming straight towards me. Something huge and near impossible to describe other than dark and hairy, covered the 150 feet between me and the tree line in just a couple seconds. Whatever it was barely brushed against the side of me, knocked me down, and sent me down rolling about 5 feet from where I was, raced around the side of the church. Just like that, it was over. No more sound, no footfalls, no animal screams, no breaking branches, just me, alone, terrified in the dark. Once I recovered, I didn't bother walking the path out. I sprinted across the stone lines and broke for my car, got in, and drove off the well-lit parking lot. I only realized after I parked that I never even took the time to turn my headlights on. I was on a camping trip with my school. At night, we put on a campfire and we were all having fun. Suddenly, we heard someone screaming for help. That person sounded like a classmate of ours. I think his name was Kato. I'm half Japanese. At the time I was in Japan. Came in a spot, we heard him scream, and we again heard him saying, "I'm here, help me." We rushed there only to see a shed. Then we saw him running to us asking, "What are y'all doing out here?" I was so scared, and I heard you all screaming, so I came here to see if you were all okay or not. Our teacher fainted, and I was so effing scared that my soul left my body for a second. It was late one night. I was walking over to the kitchen to get a midnight snack when I see a dark brown cattail peeking out from the wall. I was confused as my last cat, who had a brown tail, died 2 years ago. I thought it was one of my cats with orange tails, but when I entered the kitchen, neither of them was anywhere to be seen. I know it wasn't as scary as some stories, but it really made me miss her. Rest in peace, Allie. I was about 12 and stayed overnight with a friend. She had a cute guinea pig, and we were playing with it before we went to bed. It was healthy and active, nothing wrong with it. That night, I dreamed of a path in the woods and a fork in the path. If you went left, the path is clear, but if you went right, there was a dead guinea pig in the path. In the morning, as we're waking up, I told my friend about the dream. We were screaming and laughing as we went downstairs to check on the guinea pig. We got to his cage and it was dead. My friend became hysterical, and her mother yelled at me for having told her about my dream. Word got around school. Some of the other kids were afraid of me and thought I was weird. I felt really bad. There is a small playground next to a weird overpass in our city, like 2 swings and a slide. It's hard to get to. I don't even know why the city put it there. It's not lit for night use except by a single street lamp. If you use the overpass at night, it looks so eerie, and sometimes the wind makes the swings move slowly. In high school, everyone said a little girl died there, and if you don't hold your breath when she's going over the overpass, she'll claim your soul. I still hold my breath, and I'm 37. A decommissioned offshore lighthouse. Even though the tower is locked and the utilities have long been disconnected, residents viewing it from the shore have witnessed the beacon lighting up randomly late at night, 2 to 3 times per year. The structure remains solidly locked, and no boats have been reported in the area when the sporadic illumination occurs. The Warwick Crooner. On the corner of Chestnut and Elm in the backyard of 361 Elm Street, every full moon on the rusty old swing set, a squat figure swings, vocalizing hymns of yore. These fools who dare spare a glance are immobilized, forced into observation until his Bluetooth headphones die and he goes in to charge them. After the encounter, his victims are quite never the same. The crooner, he visits them in their dreams, haunts their nightmares. They see him every night as their eyes finally close. I was a caregiver in a retirement home for 6 months at the beginning of the pandemic. We had one patient, let's call him Robert, that was mute. So when they called us, because they needed something, of course we would just hang up and go to their rooms. I'd been on vacation for a week, and my coworkers and I didn't have a chance to go over what had happened while I was away. We had 24 patients for 2 caregivers, so we'd split the unit in half, 12 residents for each caregiver, and we would help the other if needed. So the first shift after my vacation, I was taking care of Robert's unit. A few minutes after I arrived, I got a call from Robert's room. So I hang up, finish with my current patient, and calmly walk to the room. When I arrived, the door was locked, which was really unusual since Robert usually leaves the door wide open. I knock, unlock the door, and open it. To my surprise, the room is pitch black except the television that was turned on. It took for me a few minutes to realize that Robert wasn't in the room. So I called my coworker and asked, "Have you seen Roberts?" And when they told me, "Oh yeah, he passed away 2 days ago." Alright, weird, but not the first time that our system glitches like that. We get a phone call from an empty room. I go on with my shift like nothing happened. I left the door open. When I was helping another patient walk out to the kitchen, when we passed Robert's room, they said, "Hi, Robert. Thought you were at the hospital. Welcome back." I was 100% convinced that the room was haunted now. We would get a call from that room a few times a week until Robert was buried, and after that, nothing else happened. We also had another patient calling us because there was activity in his room. Marine stationed in Japan back in 2010 to 2012. I was military police. One night around 2 to 3 a.m., we hear over the radio, any units seeing a light over the water south? It was a Marine air station based on the southern tip of Japan. We had no flights coming in or going out that night. Everyone knew there shouldn't be a light flying over the waters. So about 3 patrol cars met up at the airfield where there was a way better view. Sure as crap, there's a light sitting out over the water, blinking, slowly on and off. Some guys tried to say it was a star, so we had traffic control cameras from dispatch zoom in on it. Turns out it was slowly moving out of the cameras. So while we couldn't tell it was moving, the cameras picked it up. We sat there kind of amazed for an hour before it went away. As we're getting back into the squad car, I took one last look at the night sky and saw a small light dart behind some clouds in a movement that didn't make sense. I didn't tell the other guys, so there's no way they would believe me. Months later, I was running on the seawall and stopped to lay down and catch my breath. Again, I saw a light. Watched it drive into some clouds and then disappear. This was around the time of the tsunami in Fukushima. Super weird. 2 secondhand stories from my friend who used to be a security guard in a federal building in Portland, Oregon. One night she saw what looked like someone in a dark hoodie standing by an office door at the far end of a long hallway. When she called out to the person to face her, she couldn't see a face in the hood. Then it zoomed at her, covering the full length of the corridor in about a second, sort of swooshed past her and disappeared. She was standing at the end of the hall with a non-operable window behind her. A different time, she got called into work because a coworker, a huge hulking dude she had once seen break up a fight by lifting 2 guys and smashing them together, saw something that scared him so bad he left the building without even locking up, drove home, and called in from his bed. He refused to even talk about it. Among their employees, this building has a reputation for weird noises and other sightings. I got called to a persistent fire alarms being set off in a block of flats that used to be poor houses in the 1800s. The alarms would go off 3 to 4 times a night at certain times of the year. We arrive and the residents are outside saying they could hear a woman crying. No one wanted to go in as they assumed they were setting the alarms off and she might be crazy. We went up. Yup, sure enough, we could hear a woman crying. Sounded like up the stairwell. So we went and walked. Crying got louder. Turned the landing and realized the sound was then below us. It was coming from the top step of the previous flight of stairs. Well, I nearly crapped myself. What made it worse was guess just bought a flat on the ground floor and was moving in the following week. Yup, that was me. I used bail through the front doors, past the staircase, into my flat like I was being chased by wolves. My sister has been a nurse for about 8 years in the Southern and now Northern California, worked in hospitals, med-surg, tele, ICU, dialysis centers, and now a hospice nurse. She has a few stories from the hospital, things like children laughing, shadows, patient claiming they saw another dead patient they've never met. One of the creepiest that she and the other nurses told me was about a patient complaining, scared that something was under their bed. He was older and confused, so they didn't think of it much. Checked on him, responded to multiple calls, and just tried to make him feel better. The next day, a new patient went into that room, another older person, but not confused, and called to complain about something under his bed. They sort of brushed it off again after checking. The next night, a new patient in his 20s, completely coherent, called crying that something kept running under his bed. They checked and found nothing, but the patient was in such distress and shaking, they moved him. Happened quite a few other times as well. They never found anything, but that was so creepy to me. My coworker used to be a security guard for the forensic mental health unit nearby. It used to be a mental asylum. It was renowned for treating its patients horribly. There's a graveyard nearby with 200 unmarked graves for bodies they exhumed on the old asylum grounds. A lot of the people would try to sneak into the old abandoned buildings, and my coworker and his partner would get deployed to tell them to piss off or check it out to make sure no one was there. He said very regularly he would feel spirits, see unexplained movement, and hear screaming, especially in the treatment and intake rooms. I'm not very spiritual, but I totally believe in him. That place has a lot of sad history behind it. Graveyard shift security at a hotel casino. We got called to the top floor of the hotel because people on the floor below were calling in noise complaints. I was the FNG, so I had a trainer with me, and when we went up, dispatch told us over the radio that there was no one registered on that floor. So cool, just a few idiots being idiots. We got up there, and every single door on the entire floor was wide open. Anyone who's been to the hotel knows you can't just accidentally leave doors open because they close by themselves. They weren't propped open or anything, just open. We asked dispatch if engineering was doing any work up there or had anything going on during the day. After a few minutes, they told us, called engineering, and they said no. We just noped out at that point, so there was nobody up there. Once worked in a call center very late at night. Around 8 p.m., you'd hear all the doors in the main corridor slamming shut, but the doors didn't open or close at all. Later, we tried to frighten one of the workers by telling them the place is haunted. Found out a month later that the entire building was on top of a medieval plague pit. They just built over it and left the corpses buried. I work security at night in a luxury condo. Actually, started a little over a month ago, and I already had a fair share of incidents. Alarms triggering for no apparent reason, finding unusual doors unlocked, random orbs on the cameras, doors slamming while no one's around, elevator phone started ringing by itself. Was sitting in the living room late at night, once watching a TV. Had the light on and the curtains were drawn. A shadow gets up from exactly where I'm sitting and walks out of the room. I'm entirely non-spiritual, but that freaked me out. Back in 2009, I used to have a Game Boy and the camera game cartridge. I'd go around my house just goofing off, and I'd show my grandpa all the pictures. As he was looking through them, he randomly stops, and his dead stare at one of the photos. When he showed me a picture, it's a picture of my great uncle, deceased since before my birth, standing beside my grandpa's nightstand. I was never so freaked out because at the time, we shared a room. My neighbor's cat loved our yard, and frankly us as well. If I wasn't horribly allergic, I would have probably offered to buy her off of them. She was an outdoor cat who roamed everywhere, but our yard was her nap spot. She was constantly trying to get into the house. And for about 2 weeks, I swear I saw her in the living room or the sunroom. My husband and kids would see her too. Every time we walked in to remove her, she'd disappear. It stopped after those 2 weeks. Then we didn't see her at all, so I asked her if she was okay. The owner told me she had been hit by a car 3 weeks ago, the day I saw her in my house. This was close to 5 years ago, and I still miss that sweetheart. My 2-year-old woke up at 3 a.m., sat up in his bed, looked to the corner of his room, the bit that the camera doesn't cover, and said hi, then paused for a little while, like he was listening to someone, then said, "Okay, bye," laid back down and went back to sleep. Living on site for a cooking job in a 140-year-old building in a small village, I'll go downstairs in the middle of the night because it smells like someone's cooking. I'll hear the super old dresser's handle rattle while I'm trying to go to sleep. I'll hear something that sounds like a marble falling from the height, then bouncing and rolling. I asked about it, was told a couple stories, but the weirdest one was the staff sitting at the bar joking about the ghosts, trying to name it. The bar printer just started printing out server name, Peter, multiple times. The last one, I want to be clear that I was not there for. A picture of the chit apparently exists, however. I have yet to see it. Back in 2008, one of my colleagues got killed in a car accident. The next morning, I was sitting at my station when the boss came walking down the hallway with tears in her eyes. I knew something terrible had happened, and the second she told me Ben had been killed, I felt a breeze behind me, so I turned to look and see what it was. I saw him standing there in another hallway, smiling at me, like everything was just fine. I was left with the most chilling feeling in my gut. I still miss him dearly. When I was in high school, my mom spent the late afternoon dealing with some mystery, abdominal pain. After some home remedies and failing to sleep it off, she gets back close 12 to 1 a.m. My stepdad drives her to the ER in case her appendix bursts or what have you. Now it's just me in the house, alone and worried. I talk to myself into place of knowing that there's nothing for me to do in my position. So I turn off the lights around the house and try to go to sleep. Not long after, I open my eyes again and see the hallway light on from under my door. Afraid that we had some kind of home intruder, I sat there breathing little and moving even less to listen for any signs of life. Our house is fairly old and shoddy as far as American bungalows go. The floors creak enough to even hear someone shifting their weight on them while standing. I hear absolutely nothing in the house for the longest time until, click, I heard the light switch get flipped and watched the light turn off as I'm watching the door. I elect to get out of bed and do the most pitiful horror movie victim hello into the darkened house to no response. After this, I spent the next 20 to 30 minutes sitting and pacing around my bedroom with the light on until my parents came back sometime before 3 a.m. Apparently, my mom had nothing too bad wrong with her, so they gave her some stronger painkillers to knock her out. Her abdominal pain has never returned yet, nor has my house guest. I was at a friend's apartment with another friend. Us two visitors were sitting on one side of the kitchen table looking into the living room, the friend who lived there facing us. We were just talking when I saw a large, dark figure of a man, like a shadow, standing on its own, walk across the living room. I immediately looked at the friend next to me and said, "Did you effing see that?" Which, of course, I did, and I said so. We told our friend what we saw. She got freaked out and said something like, "I can't believe this is happening again." She explained that since she was a child, people have been seeing something following her, or often standing behind her, and eventually happens everywhere she moves. She left that apartment shortly after. My brother passed away in 2008. Fast forward to 2016, I was asleep and I had a dream about him, as I often did since he passed away. This dream was different. It was like he was talking directly to me, looking straight in my eyes. In the dream I asked him, "Is it really you?" He said yes. I said, "Prove it." And he reached out and touched me on the arm. When he did, I jolted up in bed, wide awake, covered in sweat. I thought all this was really strange. I went to the bathroom to put some water on my face. I was looking in the mirror. I saw that there was a backwards R written on my arm in pen, exactly where he touched me in the dream. The letter R was the first letter of his name. There was no pens in my bedroom. I have never sleptwalked before. You can call me crazy or lying or whatever, but this was the single most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!
The flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.
Creatures over there! You have to beware!